Hey everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Yak with Mac. This week I got to talk to Asset Protection Manager Jennifer Schaefer. Jennifer speaks about looking at your career as a kaleidoscope and so much more. You gotta listen in. Prepare to be inspired. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny with another edition of the Yak with Mac, and I have got another terrific, inspirational guest for you today. It's all about leadership, and I can't wait for you to hear from this terrific leader. We're going to jump right in. And so I want to introduce Field Asset Protection Manager, Jennifer Schaefer, to the podcast. Jennifer, welcome. It is so great to have you. Thank you so much for joining. How are you?
Oh, you know what? I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I smiled intro because I am so full of the same passion. I mean, hashtag passion for future, hashtag magenta life. Here we are on a gorgeous day on a Thursday, and you and I get time to chat. I love it.
It couldn't get any better, right? So
Right.
there's so much I want to get into with you today. It was so great to connect with you a few days ago. And there's so many things that you talk about career-wise that so have a lot to do with leadership. But I think it's so important that the audience first hear about your very, very unique career journey. And I want to give you plenty of time and space to talk about that. So go ahead and walk us through your career. You can go back as far as you want or as little as you want, but either way, I know how fascinating it is. So
Yeah.
please walk us through your career journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's 24 years of unpacking the box, and it is really exciting and it's very different. I've done a number of different engagements over my time, and I've been very humbled to share my career journey because it's so different. It's very I would say non-traditional, right, in the loss prevention or asset protection world. And, I've been in asset protection, or what I like to say is the criminal justice world, for over 24 years. My education was in political science with a German minor. I was able to, go into a master's program with criminal justice leadership over a span of 10 years. What do we want to do when we grow up? I was the little kid that wanted to go to the ocean and be a marine biologist. And then 24 years later, I'm in criminal justice. And what's really exciting is I started my career with an opportunity as a clerk, with the criminal court calendar and court systems. I had a part-time position, in a women's correctional facility. So I started building on the layers. And then I had an opportunity. I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Target's headquarters is there. So I picked up an opportunity to join their asset protection department, which really allowed me to focus on an area of the industry, being in retail, that really afforded me a lot of great resources and network. I mean, as in my early 20s, that brought me to relocation opportunities to Dallas, back to Minnesota. And then I had a additional opportunity to join a company called Caribou Coffee Company, which was the second behind Starbucks, very regionally based out of Minnesota. And I was second in, and I was able to help build a loss prevention at the time department. And I was there for 8 years. And then all of a things move and shake, and you get a chance to meet different people. And I met some of my what would be colleagues for the Golden Arches, McDonald's Corporation. And I joined a team of 10 amazing individuals, and I had a multitude of regions and markets that I supported, over 2,200 stores at the time, all within
Wow.
securing our teams, right? It
Wow.
was
Yeah.
amazing. And so, building that brand and building, that team over 6 years at McDonald's brought me to yet another state, Ohio, CBUS, which was really neat. And then came back to Minnesota. And how do we get to wireless? Well, there was an opportunity that they built a position within the Great Plains area after 10 years within T-Mobile of supporting from a remote position. 2018, I joined this magnificent brand, and now we are almost 4 years in as an asset protection manager, still protecting people, brand, and profitability.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
There's so much there. And so I think I'll just ask, what would be one or two lessons along the way that you would like to share with the audience that maybe you picked up and you learned?
It's something that we talked about when we first met. I think what's important, and I brought over a prop and I had showed with you, this is a kaleidoscope. And so we're all familiar with kaleidoscopes. Every time you turn or shift, you maybe see different shapes or colors. And one of my biggest pieces in my career is it's a kaleidoscope. Every time I've made a shift or change, what's so important is that you never realize, right, until you get older, possibly, or that point, that everything in life is preparing you truly, personally and professionally, for that next stage, that next journey in your book, right? And as I continually work on writing my own book and story in life, is that something to take away of information is being open, that open mindset, that creativity, taking that leap of faith, being out of your comfort zone. And we hear that time and time again, but every single move I've made career wise has been something that truly prepared me for that next stage in my category of criminal justice. And so for me, taking the road less taken, taking the turns, the winds, removing speed bumps and saying, this is our oyster, and how do we want to form and create it? Because it's really, what do we want to be known for?
I love that, and I want to jump into this unbelievable article that I'm going to share with the audience when we post this. And I love that how you've made like such the most out of all of the different steps that you've taken, and it seems like to me you've made asset protection, which is a vital, important part of our business and any business. You made it kind of come alive because I could say for myself, man, asset protect. No, I don't want to do that, So, but
Yeah.
I love how you took that on and you made it come alive. Let's get back to the article and get into the article because it's a fascinating written piece, and you're very talented in writing, by the way. That's another talent that I think
Thank
you
you.
you have that maybe you haven't tapped into, but you certainly did for this. You mentioned your career being a kaleidoscope. Hey, go a little bit deeper on that because I think a lot of people love those word pictures, and a lot of people are visual learners. I'm so glad you brought that prop. What else did you mean by that?
I think the biggest thing is really acknowledging and recognizing who you are and being comfortable in what you represent as your brand. For me, while I've been in criminal justice 24 years and asset protection is the coin word, that's maybe the department, whether it's loss prevention or security, I am the brand. I bring in SME or subject matter expertise of criminal justice. The article itself was written a year ago, and as we talked, it was published for a loss prevention magazine in the EU initially out of the UK. And so it was all for the subscribers worldly. And then it was brought over to the US. And it was about leveraging your strengths in loss prevention in your journey specifically. And I appreciate the compliments about the writing. I'm actually working on my own book. And I think what's really important is, for me, what type of foraging are you creating in your own adventure, right? What are your aspirations and driving those aspirations? I look at some of the things that I've done over my career, and it was about never forgetting where I came from, always ensuring that we both put our pants on the same way. And I think many people, not intentionally, forget their ability to recall where they came, where they built their goals. What was that change agent that they really brought in? For me, there's no challenge too small. And now with all the international exposure and the opportunities globally, and what really the pandemic brought, it brought those connections closer together. It's like, the daisy or the sunflower going and growing out of ashes, right? Is that how do we continue to mold and shape ourselves through not only branding, but rebranding? I really do 3 to 6 months, every 3 to 6 months, I self assess where I want to be, where I want to go, and where I'm headed. And it really comes with being diversified.
Wow, I love that. And I made myself a note here real quick because I don't want to let that point go. I loved everything you said. The last thing really hit me where you said branding and rebranding,
Mhm.
and then you were very specific. Talk a little bit more about that. Like, how do you know when it's time to rebrand a little bit? Is that okay? I'm looking to move to another position now, or I just want to get better here. How do you know? What are some things that are triggers for you?
I think for me, the biggest thing is, my old boss, who was a judge, said that I was a rolling stone that gathers no moss. Patience, grasshopper, right? And for many people, and you and I talked about it, one of my things, even on LinkedIn, is a high octane jet fueled individual, a triple A cup of espresso. For me, it's being mindful and being creative of what you want to do. You can always sharpen the saw. You can add more tools to your toolbox. You can be creative. The networking capabilities that we have, not only with social media, but picking up the phone and calling, do the video conversation, sit down for a cup of tea and coffee. And for me, what I find is if there's a sense of, I don't want to say complacency as much as comfortability, because we can all be comfortable and we don't want to continue to spread our wings. We don't want to stretch our abilities because we're comfortable. For me, I have found because of either positions or opportunities have come to me, or I've reached out and said, how can I contribute? Not being afraid to learn, right? And it's not about just learning your role. For example, I oversee and facilitate a asset protection wireless council that I do, and I've been doing for a few years. And I just started at grassroots, like many people starting different things, but it's about being a human conduit of communication, a human conduit of taking people along for the journey. I never rid anyone's coattails, the old adage. I always sewed my own coattails. And I think that's what's really optimal when we talk about what type of lens you're looking through when it comes about branding or assessing where do you want to go. And if you're comfortable and you're okay in that current position, that's wonderful. You're going to have that piece. But for me, I always aspire to do more, be more, and bring people to my board of directors.
Bring people to your board of directors. I love that. And I love how you're saying bring people along for your journey. And just, no one's probably telling you that you want to help others and you're doing that on your own. I love the other two expressions, the high octane personality and the AAA espresso personality, right? So
Yeah.
so let me ask this though, Jennifer, has there been times where that has been a hindrance even to you? Has there been times where people are like, "Whoa, slow down," and then that could be very difficult, right? As how have
Mhm.
you used that to your benefit and your advantage over the years?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kenny. And I think what's important is that knowing your personality and being in tune to who you are, knowing your audience, what's your communication style, how do you communicate the best? There have been times that I've acknowledged it before maybe my audience. Sometimes when I get passionate and excited, I tend to ramp up my speed. So there's little things that I do to monitor that, especially when I do a lot of public speaking or there's panel discussions. I'll never forget one of my supervisors said, you know what, whenever you're in a meeting and you want to raise your hand, give it time to get through the conversation because by then maybe that question would be answered. Also be mindful that when I do public speaking and maybe I'm ramping up, sometimes a personality like my own can be intimidating. There's a sense of confidence in many ways, but also learning when it's time to take a step back versus taking a step forward. I lead, that's just my natural personality. I've led teams, I've led projects over my years. At the same time, I'm happy to be guided and be led appropriately. And I think some people fit into, are you a leader? Are you a follower in different assessments, right? You're shaking your head, whether it's, a project or, maybe on a phone call. But what's important is that allowing others to share their story, knowing that it's really about the team, right? It's all about choices and what we do when we develop ourselves because, people are taking individual time to assess you all the time. And I've had different feedback when I've even visited stores in my career and really great conversations because I find it is, the real you, right? There's the be you that we talk about at Magenta, there's the real you. And for me, it's being me, but at the same time, knowing that my 24 years is in a category that sometimes may feel like a pucker factor security, loss prevention, People may be investigated. So it's all about what you're doing as your role too, and helps to understand better.
Yeah, I love that. It's such sound advice for folks that are building that brand, as you talked about earlier. I want there's a few more topics I really want to get into
Sure.
with you, and I want to combine. You really went deep, I thought, in the article about mentoring and the
Mhm.
need for yourself to be mentored, but just that burning desire to mentor others. And so, and I'm just going to say it, right? Because I mentioned this to you the other day. A lot of times we think about corporate security, asset protection. We're probably picturing Columbo, some guy in a trench coat, hiding behind the bushes somewhere. And it's Women's History Month, and you've been a successful lady in
Mhm.
this field that, in my experience, has been male dominated. And yet you have navigated through several companies, enormously successful. And so has mentoring helped you there with that? And are people like surprised and they want to really pull from you even more when they find, wow, you're in field asset protection, really? Talk a little bit more about that and really highlight just the importance that you feel on mentoring.
Yeah, well, really great points, and I'm happy to dive in deeper because, you're right. When it comes to mentoring, I have been mentored for a number of years, and I've done many, many different. I've had the a liberty and blessed by mentoring many individuals, and I still mentor individuals that I've hired years ago, and just career advice, personal advice. What do you recommend on even how do I put my portfolio together? And you always want to maintain a competitive set. Remember, it is about your brand and who you are. But at the same time, you have to remember when it comes to mentoring, you own that mentorship. It shouldn't, it should be kind of a grassroots, organically grown process. And yes, we have different mentoring programs and even the mentoring match at T-Mobile. But I don't want people ever to deter away from if they want to mentor for maybe the constant personality connection to maybe they want to look at a category asset protection. What's nice about my career is that I have dabbled in so many different areas, which has afforded me the ability to keep that, what I said before, the saw sharpened, the ability to conduct myself in different aspects of my asset protection, career, right? Whether it's risk management, whether it's consultation, whether it's major event planning, including different type of social media processes to marketing to large 500 plus, attendee, events where we're sharing about what we do. I think what's important when it comes to either selecting a mentor or being a mentor is what do you really want to get from the mentorship, right? And it doesn't have to be anything short or long, but what's important is that even if it's maintaining conversation and contact. And when we talk about asset protection specifically and being in that role, whether it's 4 years almost at T-Mobile to 6 to 8 to 4, at the end of the day, what's important is that the industry has for many many years been male dominated. McDonald's, I was the only female on a male team of 10 for 3 plus years. I was the other individual in Caribou Coffee working behind my director who was a male. I've really
Wow.
been afforded great, great relationships on the male and female. I don't look at it as gender related as much as what each person can bring to the table. You mentioned it, Women's History Month. How exciting to celebrate women and the collaboration and where women have gone and come. And also International Women's Day, which we talked about too, being on March 8th. And I spoke on a panel of very influential women, whether it was Nike, whether it was the vendor solution provider, all these different women that have gone through the channels, or we would say sometimes the ranks per se, but not forgetting who you are and not minimizing what you can bring to that table is so critical, whether gender related or not. But obviously, with DE&I and what continually companies are trying to do around the world is really tap into the knowledge and resources what people can bring to the table versus maybe the high heels or the dress or the business suit or shoes they're wearing.
Oh, wow. You just really, really nailed it and hit it home. Wow, there's so much there. I'm going to get you back on this podcast, but I have one more topic that is so important that I got to take advantage of your experience and your leadership on, and that is the great resignation that we've been seeing across all industries and even across ours. And so, how do leaders hold on to their best people? What are some two or three things that you've seen out there in all of the experience that you have that leaders can do, two or three things leaders can do to prevent that great resignation from hitting home for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You're right. We're seeing it in drones, right? Number one, I recommend, in the leadership position is be as transparent. Now, there's certain things that we can't always provide at the time or we don't know, but be as transparent and be you, right? We say that at T-Mobile as much as possible with your team. Really, if you're going to support your team or support an individual in aspirations and their goals and development, then own that as a leader, right? There's both sides to that, that I want to say that coin, that once, we own it as an individual, but, please try to provide a talking track or guidance that can be done. Because I think what happens is when we look at the great resignation, what's the change? Take out COVID, people always had options. They will always have options. And, I think it aligns with regards to what is important in our life every day. I think to myself and even talk with my significant other about what do we want to be doing and where do we see ourselves, right? And what does that look like? And what's important, right? Time. When we look at time, that is the biggest mistake that we could assume we have forever, right? And it's one of those things that when we talk about leadership, it's once again being open to someone's diversified growth. Don't hold them back. Support and keep that open dialogue, because it's one of those where are people leaving companies or are they leaving people? And what we
Wow.
can do,
Yeah.
right? We can do surveys, we can do P360s when it comes to the survey feedback, and we can do all these self-assessments, but are we truly acknowledging and recognizing good people for good work? And I think that's what we need to do, is identify where our shortcomings may be, look at how we can strengthen our foundation, and really utilize our employee base, whether it's Magenta or others, with that leadership to really come to that common goal and that common mindset. Because at the end of the day, people want to intrinsically work together for the betterment of the whole. And I think that that's really critical when we talk people coming or going. It's all about choice in life, and that should never change.
Wow, you gave four or five really practical things to do, but going even a little bit deeper, right? Don't hold somebody back, and if we're more concerned with the individual than the business, and everything else will work itself out. I love that. I
Mhm.
love that. Jennifer, this has been amazing.
Thank you.
I'm just blown away by all of the things that you said. I'm sure everyone that will watch this will be blown away as well. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. But here's the thing, I got to get you back on, and especially if you're writing a book, and I'm sure you're going to write more articles. I'd love to hear more, especially on the personal brand thing, because while everything you said hit home, I think that leaders really struggle with that, and know when to really change their brand around, and oh no, I got to be the core of me. You don't have to change that, but you could definitely, as you said, sharpen the saw a lot. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. Will you come back on with me?
Oh, Kenny, I would love to. As I said before, this has been great. I think it helps, if anything, open different thought processes and filters and lenses of how people want to just, take a look in the mirror, right? Grab the steering wheel, whether it's 10 and 2, 9 and 3, and, drive it like you own it, drive it like you're passionate, and be who you are, because that's the intrinsic piece about the value that we add. And yes, love to be on again, as I said. And yes, actually, little sneak peek, there is another article being worked on right now on an international side of how we cross pollinate women in security, networking opportunities, and really breaking down barriers. So it's about bonds, bridges, and brands. And it should be coming out here this summer from the LP magazine. And obviously, it's very exciting. So a lot of partners, and I'm excited to show it.
That's up. Bonds, bridges, and brands. I can't wait. This is awesome.
Yes,
So we, when that drops, we getting you back on, no doubt.
right.
Jennifer, thanks again, folks. This has been Kenny and Jennifer with the Yak with Mac. We will talk to you next week. Jennifer, thanks again.
You're welcome. Bye.
Okay.